The new literary theory has revolutionized the whole concept of established literary criticism. It has carved in new directions and dimensions. The new literary theory has challenged the organic view of literature. The recent theory has aimed to dislodge the notions of intention as predominant for interpretation. The earlier critical theories of literature, in their efforts to structure framework of interpretation, became more and more institutions for model building, taking from the influences from psychoanalysis, Marxism, and social theories. The new theory holds that the desire to change institutions through literature is nothing but a delusion. The postmodern theory has also condemned the division of literature like classical or romantic, the real or the imaginary. According to postmodernists, all literatures are imaginary and fictional. The term postmodernism was first used by Toynbee when he expressed his notion of postmodern age of Western history. The new verbal coinage has been used frequently by Harry Levin, Ihab Hassan, and others. During the last 20 years, the term postmodernism has been used extensively by sociologists, philosophers, and art critics. The story of Douglas Sirk provides the paradigm of postmodernism in culture. He produced several films in 50s and 60s which were critical parodies of American bourgeois values and Hollywood's craze for melodrama. Sirk was actually deconstructing films. He gave a new critical significance by changing the meaning and initiating a process of recycling of what had become outdated and obsolete. The process of remotivation can be traced back to the mind. 19th century Paris, when the inventions of camera brought the art of photography to the masses. It initiated a mass culture and posed a serious challenge to the traditional aesthetics. Postmodernism has gone beyond the book. It has reached out to the electronic media. The function of literature, the art of storytelling, has been taken over by films and television. Postmodernism thus represents a new stage in human history. The living voice has yielded to the cold alphabets, and now, for all practical purposes, television, tape recorders, and computers have taken over the roles formerly played by books and libraries. Akira Kurosawa, the Japanese cinema director, transformed Shakespeare's masterpiece Macbeth on screen in 1956 using a different language altogether, titled The Throne of Blood, and preserving the organic dramatic conflict. Kurosawa's characters are samurai personages moving against medieval Japanese castles and landscapes. The film entirely discards the great poetic language of Shakespeare, but at the same time, one notices the miracle of transformation of the poetry of one medium into the poetry of another medium. In literary criticism, postmodernism is associated with post-structuralism. Derrida contends that structure has always been neutralized or reduced, and this by giving it a center, a referring to the point of presence, a fixed origin. According to Derrida, center is a kind of wish fulfillment and should be summarily dismissed as the useless legacy of the old metaphysics. The idea of centering has opened up what was supposed as to be a closed system of empirical data and result in pre-play and indeterminacy. There is such an indeterminacy in any fictional artwork that neither consistency or certainty is possible. The text must be read as slippery, deceptive, unknowable, and most importantly, an unstable narrative. Camus' The Fall and Outsider is a good example of postmodernist work. In Camus, there is no center, no fixedness outside the discourse itself, and even that is vague, uncertain, indeterminate. Kafka's Castle forces a constant realignment of text and reader through irony, tone, and decentering. The mirror theory of Lacan is a momentous experience which is closer to theatrical practices. The most important postmodern feature is indeterminacy. Nothing is certain. With the death of God, the world is fragmented, the society is fragmented, and the process of fragmentation is an ongoing process. In postmodernism, this is reflected in the breaking of forms, use of montage and collage, mixing of different genres in an unexpected manner. Since postmodern culture is essentially a mass culture, all canons are discarded, all traditional values are flouted. Ihab Hassan, a noted contemporary critic, is of the opinion that postmodern literature is traditionally nihilistic. A particular kind of literature has made itself by denying the assumptions of art, form, and language. This is the literature of silence, which turns against itself and gives an intimations of outrage and apocalypse. The literature of silence implies alienation from reason, society, and history, a reduction of all engagements in the created world of men. It exploits extreme state of mind and frequently involves separation from nature, a perversion of vital and erotic response. It dislocates the language of ordinary speech and subverts conventional notions of form. Hassan says such art pretends to become anti-art till nothing, or so it seems, remains. Here, Hassan summarizes the main characteristics of the tendency to see, beginning with Sade and extending past Barthes and Beckett. The contemporary world is an affront to man's traditional conception of himself. It hurls its scientific, economic, and psychological denials at humanity. But humanity responds with imaginative literature which seems nihilistic even as it conspires with the older forms of humanism to make the continuance of life possible. In Radical Innocence, Hassan maintains that the modern world has reduced the traditional hero of fiction to the role of rebel or victim. Radical innocence is the basic attitude of a self which refuses to accept the immitigable rule of reality, including death. He finds that there are three kinds of modern heroes, each corresponding to three kinds of mythic quests for regeneration. The basic pattern is that of the eternal cycle of day and night, the season and the life of the individual. We may imagine a circle with noon, summer and young manhood at the zenith, and night, winter and death at the nadir. The descent from light to darkness in the subject of tragedy. In Radical Innocence, the literature of silence and the dismemberment of Orpheus, Hassan is concerned with affirmation of postmodern literature. In Para-criticism, he is concerned with the responsibilities of the critics in dealing with these strange new forms of humanism. The aesthetics of the future will have to reckon with Freud, Nietzsche and even Kierkegaard, as well as Marx, who have given us compelling economics of human needs. The aesthetic of the future should learn about the playful discontinuity, and it should offer the reader empty spaces, silence in which he can meet himself in the presence of literature. This is Para-criticism, an attempt to remove the art of multivocation, not a form strictly imposed, but the tentativeness between one form and another. In old dreams, the treatment of our broken lives begin our new responsibilities. Para-criticism is playful in a Pandora's kind of ways, trendy, typographical experiments, interrupted self-interviews and so on, but repeats many of the arguments of the earlier books. Again, Hassan rejects traditional modern criticism. Barthes, Blanchard, Paulet and especially Fuller, Brown and Norman. These are the new prophets and interpreters. In Geneva School, Paulet and Raymond regard literature as neither an objective structure of meaning residing in the words of poem or novel, nor the tissue of self-reference of a message turned in on itself, nor the unwritten expression of the hidden complexes of a writer's unconscious, nor a revolution of the latent structure of exchange or symbolization which integrates a society. Literature for them is the embodiment of a state of mind. Literary criticism is language about language, a recreating in the mind of the critic of the consciousness inscribed in the text studied, generated there by words. Morse Pesham is of the opinion that the empirical and experimental methods of modern science constitutes the recognized model for meaningful and valid interpretation of the world in which we find ourselves, and sooner or later, he concludes, it will be recognized that the study of literature belongs to the behavioral sciences. The perception of art and the effective response to its science and its discontinuities prepares us for no mode of behavior, no role, no pattern, no style, but it is preparation. Art is rehearsal for the orientation which makes innovation possible. Art is one of the most terrible and certainly the most necessary. If we want to arrive at a coherent theory of literature, we must do what all other disciplines do: isolate our object, establish our subject matter, distinguish the study of literature from other related pursuits. Thank you.